Alright, so I wasn't going to do it, but I couldn't sleep, and so I thought I needed to do it. So I'm going to go through two of each of the factoring things on Desmos. Okay, and go through them. Alright, and also teach you a shortcut for two of them. Alright, so factor the expression completely. Okay, so when you're factoring, you first need to look for a GCF. Okay, a GCF is super important. Even when you're factoring these other ones down here, still look for the GCF. Okay, so when I look at these two numbers, do they have anything in common? Yeah, they do. They have 2. So I can pull a 2 out. Now, when you're pulling a 2 out on a GCF, anytime you're factoring means divide. So I'm taking this 2 and I'm going to divide each term by that 2. Now, yes, they have a 2 in common with the numbers. Now, you also could pull a negative out too. Okay, in my video that explains for, I think it was dividing rationals, there was one where you had to take a negative out. Okay, so they do have a negative in common, so let's also take that negative out. Okay, not only do they have a negative 2 in common, they also have x's in common. See that? They both have x's. Well, they both have an x, I can pull an x out. Now, you can only pull out your lowest number of x's. It'd be like if Bob had 2 pieces of candy and Sally had 3. I can't take 3 away from Bob, so it'd be unfair, so I'd have to just take 2. And then Bob's left with none and Sally's left with 3. I mean with 1. Okay? So, can't take out more than what you got. So I can only take out my lowest one, which is x squared. So I can take out an x squared. Now again, when you're factoring by your GCF, you're dividing each term by what you're pulling out. So I'm pulling this guy out. So I'm going to divide each term, and remember, a term is separated by a plus or a minus. I'm going to divide each term by what I'm pulling out. So negative 20 divided by negative 2 is positive 10. X squared divided by x squared is 1. We don't need a 1. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. And then when you divide exponentials, you subtract the exponents. So that's going to be x cubed. And that's your answer. Okay? Alright. Next one. So I only did one of those GCF ones. So this is an a equals 1. Okay? So when a equals 1, I'm going to show you 2 ways how to do this. How the video showed you, and then how I'm going to show you in my videos. Alright, so when a equals 1, you're trying to figure out what multiplies to give you this last number, and then what adds to give you that middle number. So I need to multiply to 4, and then I need to add to negative 4. Okay, so 4, I write out my multiples. 4 and 1, and then 2 and 2. Now, 1's got to be negative because when I add, I need to be negative, right? So, but it has to go to a positive. So a negative and a positive makes a negative, but a negative times a negative still gives you a positive. So those are also factors. So 4 plus 1 is 5. That's not it. 2 plus 2 is 4. Close. We need a negative 4. That's not it. Negative 4 plus negative 1 is negative 5. That's not it. Negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 4. So guess what? These are my factors. So it's going to be x minus 2 times x minus 2. Okay? And that's your answer. Now, you can also graph it on Desmos. Okay? Which you should remember from the polynomial unit. Remember when I told you to solve your polynomials by graphing? You looked at where the graph crossed the x-axis? Same thing here. Solving is factoring. Okay? It's just one step before you actually solve it. So you got to go one step back looking at the graph. So when I type this one in the graph, x squared minus 4x plus 4. Now you do have to remember your properties. Okay? See how it's sitting on the graph? If you sit on the graph, you count it twice. Okay? And you got to do opposite. So it's going to be x minus 2 twice, which is exactly what we have, x minus 2 twice. Okay, we can write it x minus 2 squared 2. Okay, so you can factor using Desmos. All right. So this one, same thing. Okay, I'm going to do both ways. All right. So I need to know what multiplies to give me positive 8 and adds to give me positive 6. Well, 8's going to be 8 and 1, 4 and 2, and that's it, right? And it's a positive number, so I don't need any negatives over here. Well, I mean, you can. You can. But I know this is positive, so I know a negative 8 and a negative 1, that's going to give me negative 9. We don't need negatives, okay? So 8 and 1 is 9, that's not right, but 4 and 2 is 6. So my factors are going to be x plus 4 and x plus 2. Let's check the graph. X squared plus 6x plus 8. Looky there. X plus 4. X plus 2. Is that what we got? X plus 4. X plus 2. All right. So Desmos can help you out. Okay. It can help you out with a few of them, not all of them. Okay. So it can help you out with a equals 1. It can also help you out when a is not 1, which is the harder of the two. So I don't usually use it when a equals 1, but I do use it a lot when a is not 1. Okay? But I'm going to go through how the video showed you the bottoms up method. So the bottoms up method says to take this first number and to multiply it by the last one. So now I'm going to have x squared minus 8x plus 12. Now that's completely illegal that we multiplied that. So that's why in the end, you have to undo your multiplication, which is undoing. Undo a multiplication would be division. Now, once you do the bottoms up, you have an a equals 1 scenario. So I need to know what multiplies to give me 12 and adds to give me negative 8. Well, 12 is going to be, let's use our common sense. It's not 12 and 1. It could be 2 and 6. Okay. Now it has to be negative. All right, so 2 plus 6 is a positive 8, but to keep it multiplied to positive and add to negative, if we make both of them negative, negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12, but negative 2 plus negative 6 is also negative 8. So this is going to be x minus 2 times x minus 6. Now, we did this illegal move over here, so what you multiplied by, you're going to have to divide by in the end. So I need to divide by 3. Now, you have to reduce before you bottoms up. Now, this one is already reduced, so I can't do anything. So if it's already reduced, go ahead and bottoms it up. So I'm going to put the 3 in front. So it's going to be 3x minus 2. I can reduce 6 over 3. 6 divided by 3 will give me 2. So it's going to be x minus 2. All right, and that's your answer. Now, if you're good with fractions, Desmos is going to be okay for you here, okay? No, 4. I'm trying to remember what it was. So, negative 8 and 4. All right, now, the only thing here is that you're going to have fractions. Desmos doesn't give you fractions, okay? So, I see that 1 is x minus 2. Well, I got 1 to be x minus 2. Now, if you don't know your fractions and your decimals, you can always Google them too, okay? Especially with online learning and all that stuff. Or you can play around with your calculator. But this is negative 0.6 repeating. Google it, okay? Probably people watching this are like, she's crazy. But I do sometimes when I forget it. So I'm typing in Google as I'm saying Google. All right, so we're going, I'm not on Google. Let's go to Google. I'm a Google fan. All right, so let's go. Okay, this apparently is not. So we're just gonna Google it. So I want to know what fraction is the repeating decimal. Okay, let's reword that. I'm being crazy. Repeating. I can't think right now. 0.6 in fraction. I can look better in a video later. I don't know why I'm struggling right now. Repeating decimal point 6 in fraction form is 2/3. See right there how it says it's 2/3? So, okay, so it was a positive right there. So it's going to be negative. So it's going to be x minus 2/3. So on the graph, I had 0.667, which is 2/3, which in factor form would be x minus 2/3. So the graph just gives you this point right here. Okay, and you got to continue the bottoms up. So I'm going to put the 3 in front, and that's how you get the 3x minus 2 looking at the graph. Okay, all right, so it's a little extra than a equals 1, but you guys are all capable of doing either method. Okay, it's just going to take practice, but we're going to be practicing all week because that's all you're doing all week is factoring. Okay, and next. All right, so this one, same thing. You can do the bottoms up method, or you can do the Desmos method. So bottoms up would be 2 times 3, which is going to be 6. So now I have x squared plus 5x minus 6. I wrote a 3 and I don't know why. So I need something that multiplies to give me -6 and what adds to give me 5. Well, 6 is going to be 6 and 1. Well, 6 plus 1, but one's got to be negative, right? So remember your rules back from elementary. If you add a negative and a positive and you want it to be a positive, whatever sign you want it to be in the end, the bigger number has to hold. So I want it to be positive, so you need to keep your big number positive. So I'm going to make my small number negative. So 6 times -1 is -6, and 6 plus -1 is also +5. So we don't have to do any more factors. So it's going to be x plus 6 and x minus 1. Now, we legally multiplied by 2, so we got to divide by 2. 6 over 2 can be reduced down to 3. And then that 1/2 bottoms it up to the front, and I get 2x minus 1 is your answer. Okay, Desmos. I think that 5 is supposed to be negative. No, the 3 is negative. All right. All right, so again, got to know your fractions. But if you look here, that's going to be the x plus 3 because it's opposite. Well, that's what I got. I got an x plus 3, so we're good with the graph. And then the next one, it's 0.5. Well, you should all know what 0.5 is. 0.5 is 1/2, correct? So that's going to be x minus 1/2. Again, it gives it to you right here in this line, one line before your answer. So you have to take that 2 and turn it up, and you get 2x minus 1, which is what we also got here. Okay? All right, so you've learned Desmos and the mathematical way. Okay? Either way works. Now, factor by grouping, Desmos sometimes works. It only works if it factors down to 3 pretty nice factors, which not all of them do. So I'm going to teach you the factor by grouping. I actually like factor by grouping. I don't know why. I think it's fun. I know y'all make fun of me for that. So factor by grouping. You want to group, so it's going to be 4 terms. You want to group your pairs. When you group your pairs, sometimes they're not always in the order you want it to be in. You might have to shuffle them around, but when you group them, you want to group them with stuff they have something in common with. So, I'm going to group this person together. I don't know why I'm not writing. I want to group, okay. Uh-oh. All right, I got it to work. So, we're going to group the first 2 together because they both have x's in common. And I'm going to group the last 2 together because they both have a 6 in common. Now, this one has one of the tricks that you really need to listen to me on. All right, so when I factor these two, I want to know what just those two have in common, okay? Because not all four of them had something in common. If all four of them had something in common, you could have pulled something out and you could have done it a different way. But x cubed and x squared both have an x in common. You take your lowest x's, so I'm going to take an x squared out. So when I pull an x squared out, remember you're dividing everybody by x squared in that parentheses. So x cubed divided by x squared is x. Now, x squared divided by x squared is not 0, it is 1. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. It's a trick. 9 times out of 10, you need to do this. If your leading coefficient, right here, of your factor is negative, you need to pull a negative out. Okay? It just is what it is. All right? So so they both have a 6 in common. And since this is negative, I'm going to pull out a negative 6. Okay? Now, when I pull out that negative 6, when you divide by a negative, it changes the sign. So negative 6x divided by negative 6 is just a positive x. Negative 6 divided by negative 6, that is a positive 1. Okay? Now, the great thing about factor by grouping is after the first step, you can check yourself. What's in parentheses needs to be alike. If it's not, you did it wrong. Okay? Mine are alike, so we're good. Now, so you pulled out individual stuff here. Now you're going to pull out what they have in common. So they both have in common an x plus 1, correct? So you pull out an x plus 1. And when you pull out an x plus 1, you're left with x squared minus 6. Okay? Now, if this 6 had been a 9 or a 16, that would have been a difference of squares, and we could have factored it more. But this one cannot be factored anymore. X squared minus 6 gives you nasty decimals, which is not factorable. All right, so you have to stop there, okay? And that's your answer, all right? So let's go to the next one. All right, another factor by grouping. So far, it looks like Delta Math is giving you ones that are already grouped for you. So that's a plus, okay? All right, so this one, we're going to group it together. So I'm going to group the first two together, and then we'll group the last two together. All right. So this pair right here, it only has an x in common. They only have x's. They don't have numbers in common. So pull out your lowest amount of x's. My lowest amount of x's is a 2, so I can only pull out an x squared. So I'm going to pull out an x squared. When I do that, I'm dividing each term by x squared. So that's going to be x minus 3. Now, I told you when your leading coefficient is negative, I like the Delta Math is doing this. Gives you a lot of practice. You got to pull out a negative. So I'm going to pull out a negative 13 because what they have in common is only a 13. Okay? So now I'm going to divide each term by what I'm pulling out. And I get x minus 3. Okay? Again, what's in parentheses needs to match. Do they match? They do. So we did it right. So we can continue. So again, if they match, that means that you can pull that out. So I'm going to pull out an x minus 3. And I'm left with x squared minus 13. And again, 13 is not a perfect square, so I cannot factor it anymore. And that's your answer. Okay? Hope this is helping. All right. Next one. This is your sum and difference of cubes. You just have to know the formula for this one. Okay, that is all this one is a formula. Okay, so this is, so sum and difference. This one's the sum. Let me get my pen going. This one's the sum. Okay, so it has a little bit different formula than the difference one. Okay, so the sum formula for this one, and how you know you do it, it's when you have a cubed, and this is a, trying to think of the word, you got your squares and you got your cubes. Yeah, this is a perfect cubed. Okay, and this is a perfect cube because 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And then I think 64 is 4. Let's see, let's say, don't quote me on that. 4 times 4 times 4. Haha. Okay, you can't quote me on that one. So that one is 4 cubed, okay? So, sum of cubes formula is going to be The sum one is x, or x plus y times x squared minus xy plus y squared. Okay? I wish I didn't run into the question mark there. All right, now this is your x, this is your y. Now the whole term is your x, like the 64h cubed is your x. So x equals 64h cubed, okay? And then y equals the 1, okay? I'm just kidding. All right, this is your x cubed and this is your y cubed. Sorry, brain fart. You've got to take the cube root of 64h cubed. Well, if you don't know the cube root of 64, you can type that in. So the cube root of 64, as we said, is 4. And then the cube root of h cubed, that's just like saying the square root of x squared. That's just x, right? So that's just going to be 4h, okay? And then the cube root of 1 is 1, okay? Then once you get your x and your y, it's just simply plug it into the formula. So it's going to be 4h plus 1 times, now this is saying to square your x. I need to square this whole thing, like everybody, the 4 and the h. So it's going to be 16h squared minus x times y. Well, 4h times 1 is just 4h. And then y squared, well, 1 squared is 1. And that's it, guys. That's all you have to do. All right, you don't have to do anything else. Just got to know that formula, okay? All right, so that's a sum one. Let's do a difference one, okay? So this is a difference, okay? You know that by the subtraction, okay? Now, the sum and difference, so the difference formula kind of just differs just a little bit, not a lot of bit, okay? So the difference one is going to be x minus y times x squared plus xy plus y squared. I know you would think the sum would have all the pluses, but the difference one has all the pluses. So if you notice, the only thing that changed is the x plus y went to x minus y, and then the x squared plus xy was negative. So it's always plus y, okay? It's just these two signs switch in the other one, okay? All right, so again, you have to establish your x and your y. Okay, x or y, I think the video might have done a or b. Same thing, okay? X can be a, y can be b. I've told you a variable is just a placeholder, okay? It can be anything from a sunshine to a smiley face to a heart to letter M to letter N, okay? As long as this is your first one and this is your second one, okay? So you've got to take the cube root of 8r cubed. Well, the cube root of 8, okay, if you forget what the cube root of 8 is, I mean, Desmos can do it for you guys, okay? You go down to functions, we're going to go to miscellaneous, choose your own root. I want the cube root of 8, which is 2, okay? So this is going to be 2r, and then the cube root of x cubed, well, those just cancel out, and you're just left with x. So that's your x, that's your y. Plug it in. 2r minus x. X squared, I need to square this, which is going to be 4r squared plus 2r times x is 2rx, or it could be 2xr, whichever one. And then I got to square my y, which is going to be x squared. And that's your answer. Okay? So not too much work on this one. It's really just, this one's very formula based. Very formula based. Alright, but you won't see a lot of those. Okay? I try to keep those down to a minimum, but if you go to pre-cal and calc, I think you do see that. Alright. Difference of cubes, there is a formula, but I'm going to just teach you a trick way. Okay? So, difference of cubes, they both have to, I mean, difference of squares, they both need to be squares. Okay? Like perfect squares. So you need to know your perfect squares so you can recognize them. All right. So I don't know. Let's see. I'm struggling. So, x squared is a perfect square because that's x times x, right? A perfect square is just where you can, I mean, it's like 2 squared, 3 squared. Like, what is 3 squared? It's 9. What is 2 squared? 4. So 4 is a perfect square because 2 times 2, or 2 squared, is 4. So x times x is x squared, and then 3 times 3 is 9, right? Now, this is just the plus or minus of everything squared. What is the square root of x squared? X. Now, the square root of 9, I told you when you take the square root of a number, it's the plus and minus, right? So the square root of 9 equals plus or minus 3. Plus or minus 3. And that's your answer. Okay, you just got to take the square roots of stuff. All right, let's do it again. So, here we go. Right here. What's the square root of 120? So I need to take the square root of 121x squared. Well, the square root of 121 is 11. The square root of x squared is x. So this is going to be 11x and 11x. What is the square root of 144? Plus or minus 12. Okay? And that's it. That's all you have to do is just take some square roots, okay? So that's it for factoring Delta Math Explained. I hope this helped. If you need any more help, let me know. I know probably the sum and difference of cubes I know we struggle with, and when a is greater than 1. So just let me know, guys. All right.